Hey everyone, Brandon and Kyle back again in the Kapuka Strength Lab, and today we're going to be talking breathing. And we're going to be talking breathing in a less common fault, but one that's still very prevalent across strength athletes. And that fault is not having the ability to flex your spine forward. Now, you're not going to find many people that have this, but for the individuals who do, they're going to present with a very tall and rigid spinal position. And when they try to hinge or bend at the spine, they're not going to be able to use all of these thoracic flexion bias joints as they are intended to. So more common, we see people with a kyphosis, and we really often talk about straightening people out and getting them taller. But what about the people who have more of this extension bias? It's not really an extension bias because these aren't really extension biased joints. However, we do see this in many sport athletes, in a handful of strength athletes. So what we're going to do with Kyle's breathing, instead of focusing on intra-abdominal pressure and expanding his abdominal cavity and using his trunk and really breathing deeper here, we're actually going to be focusing on rib cage expansion, which is very important for intrathoracic pressure. And intrathoracic pressure is a complementary aspect to intra-abdominal pressure, and that's how we can maintain the entire trunk stability. So Kyle, get on the ground for me here. Now, if you have locked up shoulders or you have a locked up T-spine, you might still try this, but this is a drill that's really powerful for those who are stuck in a very extended or just more of a straightened thoracic spine. What we're going to have Kyle do in this setup is he is going to intentionally round his spine. Now, for someone who really needs this drill, they're going to get into this position and they're actually going to be semi-flat in their spine. Kyle's not going to be able to do that because his spine is not, he doesn't have that deficit. However, we're going to set him up with his elbows against his knees, and we're going to cue him to breathe starting into his stomach, pressing his stomach into his quads, and I want him to feel air slowly transferring up into his upper back, and I want him focusing on expanding this section of his back as much as possible. These should be very long, drawn out inhales and exhales to the point of like an 8-second inhale and maybe a 5 to second exhale. But the point is to get all of this musculature to slowly expand as we loosen up that intercostal musculature, and that is the connective tissue between the ribs. Just like all of your other tissues, the tissues between the ribs can still get junked up and really jammed and tight and nasty. So we need to figure out a way to get to them, and we can do that by breathing better or breathing specifically to improve rib cage expansion. So as Kyle's breathing here, you might see a slow change to where he is appearing more rounded, which is what we would be after in a drill like this. But because he presented like that to begin with, this isn't necessarily a drill we would do with him, but the end goal would look something like this for individuals who really struggle with posterior rib cage expansion or who have very locked up rib cages to begin with. Anything you'd like to add, Kyle?
Hard work. Especially if you are pretty tight through the rib cage, these breathing drills can be just as challenging as the rest of our breathing drills. You guys probably know us for talking about expansion through all of our abdominal muscles in a 360 sphere. We talk a lot about breathing and bracing. There's a large portion of our torso that's held tight, if you will, by our ribs, in our rib cage. If we don't move well through the rest of our spine, like Brandon said, these things are going to be locked down and they're not going to have good mobility. So we usually talk this, but just as important for us, make sure you breathe well, make sure your ribs move well.
And as with all of our breathing drills, we really recommend doing these outside of the training windows so you aren't down regulating your nervous system prior to loading yourself with a heavy barbell. Brandon and Kyle out.